Rosie Williams had always been curious about the world. An African American woman with a passion for cultural studies, she had dreamed of traveling far from her home in Atlanta. When she was accepted into a prestigious exchange program at a top university in Seoul, she felt as if her life was finally beginning. It was there, amidst late-night study sessions and shared coffee breaks, that she met Jihoon Kim. Charming, intelligent, and kind, Jihoon seemed to light up every room he entered. They bonded over their shared love of history and a mutual fascination with each other's cultures. As their relationship blossomed, they became the talk of the university. People envied their connection, describing it as something out of a storybook. Despite their different backgrounds, Rosie and Jihoon made each other feel at home in a world that often seemed too big. One spring evening, Jihoon surprised Rosie with a romantic picnic under the cherry blossoms. As pink petals floated in the breeze, he knelt down and asked her to marry him. Tears streamed down Rosie's face as she said, "Yes." But the joy of that moment soon turned into something else entirely. 2 days after the proposal, Jihoon asked Rosie to meet him at a secluded spot on campus. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, taking her hands in his. "I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid of losing you." Rosie tilted her head, her curiosity piqued but unshaken. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I'm not just Jihoon Kim. I'm Prince Jihoon of the Kim dynasty," he confessed. The words hung in the air, surreal and heavy. Rosie blinked, sure she had misunderstood. "Prince?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Rosie stared at him, her mind racing. She thought of their shared moments of simplicity, the long walks, the laughter. How could someone so down to earth belong to something so vast? "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to love me for me," he said, his voice trembling, "not for what I am." Rosie didn't know what to say. She loved Jihoon deeply, but the thought of stepping into a world of power, wealth, and endless scrutiny was overwhelming. As Rosie learned more about Jihoon's world, she realized that being with him meant more than just being his wife. It meant accepting a life filled with relentless expectations and public scrutiny. It meant giving up her dream of a quiet, simple life and stepping into a spotlight she never asked for. Jihoon's family wasn't thrilled by the engagement either. While his parents respected Rosie's intelligence and poise, they worried about the cultural challenges and the potential backlash from conservative circles in Korea. But Jihoon was unwavering. "I chose Rosie because I love her, not because it's convenient," he told his father one night. As for Rosie, she struggled to reconcile her feelings. Was her love for Jihoon strong enough to bear the weight of his world? Could she give up everything she knew to stand by his side? In the weeks leading up to their wedding, Rosie and Jihoon faced challenges that tested their bond. Paparazzi hounded them, tabloid headlines questioned Rosie's worthiness, and whispers of disapproval reached Rosie's ears wherever she went. But through it all, Jihoon stood by her side. He reminded her of their shared dreams and the love that had brought them together. "You're my home, Rosie," he said one night as they sat together under the stars. "I'll fight for you, no matter what." Rosie looked into his eyes and saw not just a prince, but the man who had made her believe in love. She knew their journey wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that Jihoon was worth the risk. Rosie and Jihoon's wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale. Under a dazzling sky, surrounded by loved ones, they promised to love each other through every storm. Jihoon, the reserved yet warm-hearted South Korean prince, and Rosie, the bold and kind-hearted African-American woman who had captured his heart, were ready to face the world together. After the wedding, they moved to the United States. Jihoon wanted Rosie to have a life that blended her American roots with their shared love. They settled into a cozy apartment, far from the grandeur of palaces and cameras. Jihoon enrolled in a graduate program, while Rosie started her career as a cultural ambassador, bridging gaps between Korean and African American communities. Their days were filled with quiet joy, morning walks, shared meals, and dreams about the family they would one day start. Jihoon's princely duties felt like a distant memory, and they relished the simplicity of their life, until the call came. One evening, Jihoon's phone buzzed incessantly during dinner. Rosie watched his expression darken as he answered, the color draining from his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "It's my father," Jihoon said, his voice trembling. "The emperor. He is very sick." The news hit them like a tidal wave. Jihoon booked the first flight to South Korea, with Rosie insisting on coming with him. When they arrived, the imperial palace was a somber place. Jihoon's father, the emperor, lay frail in his bed, surrounded by advisors and family. The old man's once commanding presence had faded, replaced by vulnerability. The emperor passed away days later, leaving Jihoon as the only heir to the throne. Jihoon's coronation was set almost immediately, thrusting him into a whirlwind of traditions, responsibilities, and public appearances. The simplicity of their American life now seemed like a distant dream. Rosie, standing at his side, could see the toll it was taking on him. For Rosie, palace life was like stepping into a gilded cage. Every movement was scrutinized, every word dissected by both the media and the court. The conservative factions whispered doubts about her. An African-American woman as their queen? It was unheard of, and many were not shy about their disapproval. Jihoon, however, was unyielding in his love and devotion to her. "You are my queen," he told her one night as they sat in their chambers. "No one else's opinion matters." But the pressure weighed on Rosie. The life they had dreamed of together now seemed impossible. As months passed, the strains of royal life began to test their relationship. Jihoon was consumed by his duties as emperor, working late into the night to uphold the legacy of his family. Rosie, despite her best efforts, struggled to find her place in a world that seemed determined to exclude her. Arguments became more frequent. "This isn't the life we planned, Jihoon," Rosie said one night, her voice breaking. "I feel like I've lost you, and myself." Jihoon looked at her, his face etched with guilt. "I never wanted this for us, Rosie, but I can't walk away from my responsibilities. My father trusted me to lead our people." Rosie nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know, and I love you for it, but I don't know how to fit into this world." Despite the challenges, Rosie and Jihoon refused to let their love falter. They sought ways to bridge the gap between their dreams and their reality. Rosie began working with charitable organizations, using her role as queen to advocate for diversity and inclusion. She created programs that celebrated cultural exchange, earning the respect of many who had doubted her. Jihoon, in turn, made time for their relationship, carving out moments of intimacy amidst the chaos of his royal duties. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of love and responsibility, proving that even under the weight of a crown, their bond could endure. The palace hall was unusually cold, despite the warm spring air outside. Rosie sat in silence beside Jihoon, her fingers interlocked with his under the ornate table. Across from them, the chief palace official stood, his expression as stoic as the towering statues in the imperial gardens. "We must discuss a matter of great importance, Your Majesty," the official began, his voice calm but resolute. Jihoon nodded, gesturing for him to continue. "As you know, the emperor's role is not merely to rule, but to preserve the traditions and legacy of the throne. While your marriage to Her Majesty Queen Rosie is recognized, there is concern among the court." Jihoon's jaw tightened. "Concern?" The official hesitated for only a moment, then spoke with a practiced authority. "The continuation of the royal lineage is paramount. Many within the council believe that for the sake of tradition and national unity, it would be prudent for you to take a second wife, a Korean wife. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Rosie's heart pounded, but she refused to let the shock show on her face. She looked at Jihoon, whose grip on her hand had tightened, his knuckles turning white. "That's not going to happen," Jihoon said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Your Majesty, please understand," the official pressed, his tone softening as though to reason with a child. "This is not an insult to the Queen. It is about preserving our traditions and appeasing those who question." Jihoon stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I don't care about their questions or their doubts. Rosie is my wife. She is my queen. That is not up for negotiation." The official's face remained unreadable, but Rosie could see the flicker of tension in his eyes. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, the court will not easily be persuaded. They see this as a matter of duty, not emotion." Jihoon's voice rose, echoing through the grand hall. "Then let them see what true loyalty and love look like. I will not betray the woman I vowed to stand beside." Rosie felt a swell of pride at his words, but knew this was only the beginning. The palace wasn't just a home, it was a battlefield, and this fight had only just begun. The days that followed were a storm of whispered conspiracies and veiled glances. The media speculated endlessly, painting Rosie as an outsider who had no place in the ancient traditions of the empire. The court's murmurs grew louder, their demands increasingly bold. But Jihoon and Rosie stood firm, even as the pressure mounted. "Are you sure about this?" Rosie asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper as they sat in their chambers. Jihoon turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "There's nothing to question. You are my choice, Rosie. You're my everything. No tradition or council can change that." Despite his confidence, Rosie could see the weight of the crown pressing down on him. The palace was a gilded prison, and they were both its captives. Determined to prove her worth to the court and the nation, Rosie threw herself into her role as queen. She organized cultural initiatives, connected with citizens, and worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between her identity and the expectations of her new world. Slowly, she began to win over skeptics. Her grace, intelligence, and unwavering love for Jihoon shone through, silencing many of the whispers. But not all. When the council presented Jihoon with of potential second wives, Rosie was in the room. They didn't even bother to hide it from her. Jihoon didn't even glance at the paper. He tore it in half and threw it on the floor. "You can bring me 1,000 names," he said, his voice low but seething with anger. "It will not change a thing. My loyalty is to my wife. My devotion is to my queen. And my love is hers alone." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but Jihoon's defiance was unshakable. The palace was a maze of tradition, secrets, and judgment. But within its walls, two unexpected allies emerged to stand by Rosie's side. Jihoon's mother, Queen Dowager Eunji, and his grandmother, the Grand Empress Dowager Sunhee. Rosie had braced herself for their disapproval when she first entered the palace. She'd heard the whispers from courtiers and officials, saw the sideways glances from attendants, and felt the weight of expectations bearing down on her. But Jihoon's mother and grandmother surprised her. Rosie's first meeting with the Grand Empress Dowager was a test of resilience. The older woman, known for her sharp wit and unwavering authority, observed Rosie carefully. Sunhee had seen many queens come and go in her time, and she wasn't one to be easily impressed. "You're different," the Grand Empress Dowager said after a long silence. Her voice was soft but carried a weight that demanded respect. Rosie wasn't sure if that was meant as a compliment or a warning. She met the older woman's piercing gaze and replied, "I am, Your Majesty, but I love Jihoon, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to stand by his side." The Grand Empress Dowager's lips twitched into a faint smile. Good, because being by his side will not be easy, but if you have the strength to endure, you may find that you are exactly what this family and this empire needs. Unlike her mother-in-law, Queen Dowager Eunji was a gentle soul. She had always dreamed of seeing Jihoon marry a traditional Korean bride, but when she met Rosie, her perspective shifted. Rosie's warmth, intelligence, and genuine love for Jihoon reminded Eunji of her younger self, an outsider in the palace, navigating its complexities with courage. One evening, as Rosie struggled to learn the intricate bow required for formal court events, Eunji entered the room quietly. She watched for a moment before stepping forward. "You're overthinking it," Eunji said softly, guiding Rosie into the correct posture. "It's not about perfection. It's about intention. Show them your respect, and they'll see your heart." Rosie smiled, her nerves easing under the Queen Dowager's guidance. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I want to honor this culture, but sometimes it feels like I'll never be enough." Eunji placed a reassuring hand on Rosie's shoulder. "You are enough, Rosie. More than enough. And you are not alone in this. Jihoon chose you, and so do I." When the court began pressuring Jihoon to take a second wife, both Eunji and Sunhee stepped in, uniting their formidable influence to shield Rosie. During a tense council meeting, Sunhee arrived unannounced, her presence alone silencing the room. She took her place at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. "I hear there's been talk of a second wife," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. One of the council members cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, we only wish to preserve the traditions of the throne." "Tradition?" Sunhee interrupted, her gaze icy. "Do you know what tradition truly is? It's the ability to adapt and endure. Jihoon's marriage to Rosie is not a weakness. It is a strength. And if any of you cannot see that, then perhaps it is not the throne that needs preserving, but your vision." Eunji, who had been silent until then, added, "Rosie has my full support as queen. She is a woman of grace, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. If the court values unity, they would do well to follow her example." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, their arguments silenced by the combined authority of the two matriarchs. As time passed, Rosie grew closer to both women. Eunji became a mentor, teaching her the intricacies of palace life, from navigating political alliances to understanding the subtleties of court etiquette. Sunhee, on the other hand, challenged Rosie to think strategically, often engaging her in discussions about the empire's future. One afternoon, as they walked through the imperial gardens, Sunhee turned to Rosie. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," she admitted. Rosie blinked in surprise. "I can't imagine you ever having to prove yourself, Your Majesty." Sunhee chuckled. "Oh, I did. I wasn't born into this life, you know. I married into it just like you, and I faced the same doubts and judgments. But I learned that being a queen isn't about silencing the whispers. It's about proving that they don't matter." Together, the three women became a force within the palace. They worked tirelessly to modernize traditions, bridge gaps between the royal family and the people, and pave the way for a future where love and duty could coexist. Rosie's bond with Eunji and Sunhee wasn't just about acceptance, it was about empowerment. They saw her not as an outsider, but as a vital part of the royal family, a queen who could inspire change while honoring the legacy she had married into. Through their support, Rosie found the strength to stand tall in the face of adversity, proving to herself, the court, and the nation that she was not just Jihoon's wife, she was their queen. The air around the imperial palace buzzed with the usual serenity of the early evening, lanterns casting a warm glow over the marble corridors. Rosie, dressed in a flowing emerald hanbok embroidered with golden patterns, stepped into the garden for a moment of quiet reflection. The soft hum of crickets filled the air, blending with the distant murmurs of the palace staff preparing for the evening feast. Then came the sound, sharp, unnatural. A clash of steel rang out, followed by the unmistakable cry of alarm. Rosie froze, her heart leaping to her throat. From the shadows emerged masked attackers, their movements swift and calculated. Each carried weapons glinting ominously in the dim light. They moved toward her with chilling precision, their intent unmistakable. "Protect the queen!" The commanding voice of Captain Han, leader of the palace guards, cut through the chaos. Within seconds, guards swarmed the garden, forming a protective barrier around Rosie. Swords clashed, the metallic symphony echoing against the palace walls. Rosie backed away, her eyes wide but steady as Captain Han reached her side. "Your Majesty, we must get you to safety," he urged, gripping his blade tightly. "No," Rosie said, her voice firm despite the terror pounding in her chest. "I won't leave until I know the palace is secure." The battle raged on around them. Guards fought with relentless determination, their movements fluid yet precise, while the attackers displayed a shocking level of skill and coordination. The once tranquil garden was now a battleground, cherry blossoms trampled underfoot, and lanterns swinging wildly as the combatants maneuvered through the narrow pathways. An attacker broke through the line, rushing toward Rosie with deadly intent. Captain Han intercepted them with a swift upward strike, his blade catching the intruder's weapon midair. The force of his counterattack sent the attacker reeling. But the danger wasn't over. Another figure emerged from the shadows, aiming a crossbow at Rosie. She instinctively ducked, the bolt narrowly missing her and embedding itself in the tree behind her. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder as reinforcements arrived, the palace's elite warriors joining the fray. The attackers, realizing they were outnumbered, began to retreat. Yet, their retreat felt too orderly, too rehearsed. Rosie's mind raced as she clutched the edge of a nearby stone pillar for support. This wasn't a random attack. It was a calculated assault, meant to send a message. As the final attacker disappeared into the shadows, the garden fell silent save for the labored breathing of the guards and the distant calls of the wounded being tended to. Captain Han turned to Rosie, his expression a mixture of relief and frustration. "Your Majesty, are you hurt?" he asked, his voice thick with concern. Rosie shook her head, her hands trembling despite her composed facade. "No, but I need answers. Who would dare attack the palace?" Captain Han's jaw tightened. "We'll find out, Your Majesty. This was no ordinary breach." Rosie looked around at the chaos left behind. The scorched lanterns, the fallen guards, the still air heavy with the scent of battle. Determination ignited within her. "Double the watch. Alert Jihoon and the council," she ordered. Her voice was resolute now, carrying the weight of a queen who refused to be shaken. "If someone wants to threaten this empire, they'll learn they've underestimated me." As Captain Han bowed and moved to carry out her commands, Rosie's gaze drifted to the distant horizon, where the attackers had vanished into the night. The shadows seemed darker than usual, and for the first time, the imperial palace no longer felt entirely safe. But one thing was certain: this attack was just the beginning. Rosie knew she had to uncover the truth behind it before the next move was made, not just for her own safety, but for the future of the empire.